So you're like a child that's wandered in the movie theater halfway through and you're wondering what's going on? This is Donny Cast on the 15th of July 2022. I am your host Walter on the Good Lie and the Greater Good, and well, it's kind of a slow news day, I guess, at least for me. I could talk about Biden and him going to Saudi Arabia, the Middle East, and the fist bump of doom, but I really don't care about that. It's sensationalism, it's misdirection. I don't think there's anything that was going to come out of that other than like the pure tribalism of like my side good, your side bad. I'm not interested in it. What I kind of did find, if this is going to be the thumbnail for the Donny Cast today, Joe Manchin and these two fucking mentally ill individuals, Rachel Levine and Sam Brinton, and we'll get into them here in a second. First thing I do want to bring up, I believe today I have pulled up is Christine Blasey Ford. You may or may not remember her. She was the individual that spoke out against Brett Kavanaugh, the Supreme Court justice, um, alleging that Brett Kavanaugh, when he was in high school, had sexually assaulted her. And Christine Blasey Ford, I'll just go out and say it, not allegedly, she's a fucking liar. And the reason why I knew she was a liar is when I listened to her testify. From my background in the past, I kind of can sniff it out. But in this case, it was the fact that her career, just so you understand what her background was, she earned an undergraduate degree in experimental psychology. Stop. Let me put the disclaimer up. Wikipedia is worthless, but I'm lazy. So to continue, her undergraduate degree is in experimental psychology. Then she went on and got her master's degree in clinical psychology. She received her doctorate in educational psychology. Her dissertation was on measuring young children's coping responses to interpersonal conflict. In 2009, she earned a master's degree in epidemiology with a focus on subject biostatistics. Epidemiology is pattern recognition. Can't make this fucking shit up. Why I knew she was lying is with this background that she has, she more than probably anybody else almost on the planet knows how memories are formed in the brain. And by knowing how memories are formed in the brain, she knows how she can lie without ever having the consequences for lying, because you can't prove that she lied, because memory is that malleable. And if you make a mistake from a memory that's from trauma, it can't be held against you in the same way, because if in real world land, if you honestly believe a lie is true, then you're not lying, right? I guess I should put it more accurately. If you honestly believe the reality that took place is true, even if it is objectively compromised by reality, then you're not lying. So somehow, some way, this person with this background was able to show up at a Senate confirmation hearing on a Supreme Court justice and lie her ass off. Well, what does this have to do with anything? You internet troll, you meme farmer, humble meme farmer. Well, you see, Rachel Levine, which I can't even tell you his real name anymore because it's been scrubbed off his Wikipedia page. Not that I care. Well, he's the first transgender, I don't fucking care, individual to serve in a certain capacity. Again, doesn't matter. His background, his career after completing his training in pediatrics and psychiatry at New York's Mount Sinai Hospital, Levine moved from Manhattan to central Pennsylvania in 93, where he joined the facility of Penn State College of Medicine and the staff of Penn State Hershey Medical Center. During his tenure there, he created Penn State Hershey Medical Center Division of Adolescent Medicine and Penn State Hershey Eating Disorder Program. He was in charge of the latter and was nominated for the position of Pennsylvania Physician General in 2015. Now, why I can honestly say he is because even if now she identifies as a her in the past. When he did these things, he was a he. Fuck you. You can't change history. In this case, this individual, with their understanding of child psychology, would understand how children play games to understand reality. And that's how they build their identity from scratch. His behavior is purely from an attention seeking standpoint. That's why these fucking pieces of shit, some of them do the shit that they're doing, because they know they get off on it, and they get off on the power that they have to force other people to submit to their fucking reality. It's literally the dopamine feedback loop that's going on in their heads. And uh to understand this further, the fantasies that school shooters have, um this fixation that they flip over and over in their head, building that fantasy over time to the point where it becomes so uncontrollable that they have to act out, is similar in a response to how adolescents, not just adolescents, but primarily we're going to talk about adolescents when I say this, uh, fabricate this reality of for suicide, where they fantasize about the impact that their suicide will have on the people that know them after the fact. And eventually that fantasy gets to the point where the only way that they can continue further is by acting out on the fantasy of suicide. So you have a very similar response for the attention seeking that school shooters are engaging in that you do with like suicide. That's why I will say, if you want suicide and school shooters to go away, that you need to uh, memory hole these individuals and never talk about them again, and shame them to such a degree that no one will fantasize about it, because they realize that they will be forgotten about by the culture, because culture will move on and not give them the attention that they seek. But who am I? I don't fucking know. So again, the reason why I bring all this up as we move on to good old Sam Brinkton, who has a honest to God degree in fucking like, nuclear fucking engineering, and was where is he at? He was put on to the Biden administration's uh someplace somehow. He works for the Biden administration right now in some nuclear engineering capacity. I thought it was going to be up here. It is not. Um I think he's the deputy assistant secretary for spent fuel and waste disposal in the Office of Nuclear Energy of Department of Energy, January 2022. So this fucking piece of shit human being, um, and there may be a background to this guy. I did look it up. At one point, it was talking about, he's raised by Southern Baptist missionaries who disapproved of Britain's attraction to male friend from school. They sent him to some, what's the word? It must be here. Conversion therapy that didn't obviously fucking fix. But I wonder how this whole thing led to him being really into animal role play enthusiast. He's a fucking furry. So he's a weirdo. Now, to move forward for good old Sam Brinton and Rachel Levine, I saw this picture today, that I have to show you. Is there's on good old Sam Brinton's Instagram page, which I can't get into because I don't have an Instagram, but I did yank this off the internet someplace. It's good old Rachel and Sam together taking a picture, because they're the two trans people at the French embassy celebrating Bastille Day. So they're representing the culture that we have in the United States, a man pretending to be a woman, and a man, I guess he's trans. I don't fucking know. He's into fucking wearing furry costumes and pretending to be fucking uh into animals, and having a shaved head and wearing a dress and pumps, like, because nothing matters. So good old Sam Brinton does have a Twitter page, and you can see here that, like, it's official. As of June 19th, I now serve my nation as the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Spent Fuel and Waste Disposition in the Office of Nuclear Energy and Department of Energy. But, this motherfucker looks fabulous in this, whatever the fuck, this jumper with these American flag high heel shoes. And yeah, so this is the culture. This is one side of the culture war. On the other side of the culture war, we have good old Joe Manchin. Hopefully I have a picture up. We have good old Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin representing a different side of the Democrat Party than Rachel and Sam. Good old Joe, he has the interest of West Virginia at heart. And I would go and say that Sam and Rachel, well, they don't necessarily have a California culture to them. But they have a certain other side of the Democratic Party. And to move on with one of the things that also popped up that I didn't hear anything about today, was I saw this that good old, and I guess I haven't pulled these up. I must have cleared them all out ahead of time. Good old Gavin Newsom was at the White House these last few days. And the funny thing about Gavin Newsom being at the White House is creepy Uncle Joe ain't there. Lock up your girlfriend, lock up your wives, lock up your daughters, because Gavin Newsom is prowling around the White House. And I normally I would make my joke about Jill Biden and Joe being gone. If you don't realize that when Gavin Newsom was running for, I believe it was mayor of San Francisco, he got caught diddling his best friend's wife, his best friend who was his campaign manager. Gavin Newsom repaid him by diddling his wife. So anyway, White House hunting. Newsom visits Biden while Biden is away. Yeah. So if I were Joe, a normal person may be concerned that their wife is having another man over in their house while they're out of town. And in this case, what Joe should probably be a little worried about in this case is good old Gavin Newsom, the governor of California's eyeball on the actual Oval Office, because what you're looking at here is a manufactured story. And we're going to talk a lot about that a little bit today. A little bit. In this case, this is a way for the powers that be. Let's see, Newsom's handlers and the Democrats, the DNC, the apparatus, whatever the power apparatus you want to talk about, kind of giving that spider's web a little bit of a tappity tap to see what occurs in the zeitgeist. Gavin Newsom wandering around the White House here, wandering around the White House, getting a little bit of press. Why he's there? They said in these articles, there's not a lot to these articles. They say that he's there in meetings, and I'm going like, well, who the fuck is the governor of California meeting with when the president ain't home? That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I mean, what could actually be discussed? What could actually get done when the president isn't there? And so here's Gavin walking around the White House, so they can turn around, probably, this is just my estimation, and show this out in the ether and go, does he look presidential? Like, what do you think about Gavin Newsom in the White House? Just the tip, just to see how it feels. And Washington Examiner, where this is coming from, is kind of right wing, just like Breitbart is right wing. We have another one with Biden away. Gavin Newsom heads to Washington for 4-day visit, and in this one, it's there's nothing good in these stories. Like, there's nothing to really get pulled out and talk about, because it's just the optics behind it. And I already pointed out from my notes that I'm sure there's a joke in there about Gavin Newsom and Jill Biden. I'm too highbrow for that. No, I'm really not. I just didn't put the effort out to kind of make it. It's probably going to be crass in the first place. I was just like, I don't want to put the effort out to be crass. I'm feeling a little bit better today. So right now, and I keep pointing this out, Gavin Newsom is the front runner. At least he's being put forth as the possible front runner, just the tip, just to see how it feels. And it's meetings like this that are taking place with Creepy Joe out of town in Saudi Arabia. There's nothing good that's going to come from this, because the best case is they're flaunting Gavin Newsom to actually take over before Joe's term is out, because what's her face, Kamala Harris, who is a carpet enthusiast, because she knows what rug burns are like on her knees. She's never gonna take over the presidency. She's too disliked to even legitimately have a shot, other than to kind of finish out a lame duck term for Biden. And that we're talking like after the midterms. If they push this through before the midterms, I mean, they're gonna get whooped more. And if they wait too long, if they wait if they do it too early after the midterms, it's going to look like it was the ruse that it was always supposed to be. This is just, again, in my opinion. But, question why Gavin Newsom was at the fucking White House with Joe out of town. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me, other than, someone is getting groomed. And again, as I point out my notes, like, worst case, they're plotting the coup that's taking place. So, to get back a little bit on target, between Gavin Newsom's brand the of Democrat politics and Joe Manchin's brand of Democrat politics, and how close or how far apart they are, just like how close Joe Manchin is to Rachel Levine and Sam Brinton. In this case, we're looking at Joe Manchin torpedoing newest climate package Biden commits using executive action. So, in this case, this article is discussing Manchin maintains that a bill including climate provisions isn't off the table for him, but insists the July inflation levels must drop first. That's the record high 9.1% inflation that took place, and it's probably slightly higher, but those numbers are just malleable like everything else, like the truth. The connection between the two is foggy. It seems unlikely. Yeah, the connection. This is from the article. The connection between the July inflation levels and climate provisions are foggy. It seems unlikely that the modest plan would have any significant inflationary impact. Reading these things again just blows my fucking mind. Yes, spending more money that doesn't exist because it needs to be printed out into the ether in no way, shape, or form will increase inflation. Janet Yellen saying that she thought like inflation didn't work like this; it was transitory. Um, as we keep bringing up with experts like these, who needs Gavin Newsom as a friend? So these climate provisions have something similar to what's being pushed in the Netherlands right now, and the farmer protests in excuse me, the climate provisions that the Biden administration is pushing out as part of a greater agenda towards climate change has something in line to do with or they're very similar to what's being pushed in the Netherlands that's causing the farmer protests there. They're also very similar to the green initiatives that Sri Lanka pushed in 2015 that led to their country collapsing that's going on. And Sri Lanka collapsed also because of poor economic policies, partially because you're just printing money when you don't have it. You don't spending your way out of inflation is only going to increase more inflation. It's just basic economics. So how anybody could try and say they're unsure, it's not entirely just the climate provisions. It is how you're going to meet those goals by printing more money to solve a problem that, to be honest, at this point is rather dubious from a scientific perspective. So moving on to this CBS article, because as you can see, there's very little that was coming out of that last one, because whoever, I probably should have looked at who that fucking idiot was so I can make fun of them on their Twitter page or something. So now we have a Fox News article, obviously right wing, CBS obviously tilting to the left. CBS morning show not thrilled with Biden's nemesis Manchin, multi-millionaire with Maserati. Fuck off. So yeah, I'm sure that's what Biden, or excuse me, what Manchin has in West Virginia. It's not some big diesel powered fucking Ford monstrosity. So in this, it says, quote, CBS Mornings didn't seem particularly thrilled with Senator Joe Manchin, Democrat, West Virginia, on Friday because of a report the West Virginia moderate wouldn't support climate and tax changes in a spending deal. And I find it funny that the CBS article is pointing out that Joe Manchin is a moderate. Fox framing Manchin as a moderate, also showing how these two things are painting him in a particular direction. It may not have been CBS that was painting Manchin as the moderate. It may be just from a quote there. I'd have to go back and look. But anyway, let's see. It was Fox painting him as a moderate. It just had CBS Mornings in quotations. I apologize for being ill prepared like I normally am. Anyway, the CBS senior White House correspondent Ed O'Keefe said this time he's saying he has concerns given the bigger than expected inflation report. And this should be to anybody generally, I wouldn't even say smart. This would just be, rather common sense. Yet, yes, that inflation report was bad. So, trying to put a spending bill through right now is probably not a very good idea, either optically or just pragmatically from, just general common sense again. Manchin represents West Virginia, and it's almost like different states might have their own culture and issues that might be separate from other states like California and Gavin Newsom's fucking stupidity that I keep pointing out. Um, for instance, I went and looked this up beforehand. West Virginia is 24,000 square miles and has a population of 1.8 billion or 1.8 million, while California has California is 163,000 square miles and has a population of 39.3. This is apples and oranges. West Virginia is probably roughly. I'm just going to go out and throw it out there. It's has less population than L.A. County, and I bet it's probably about the size of L.A. County. California is fucking massive. It's its own mini kingdom. Joe Manchin is fighting off his own party, in particular, a loud ideological wing, which does not have the interest of his states in mind at all. And you can see that because West Virginia is heavily based off of coal and other natural, or we should just say fossil fuels at this point. That's the culture behind it, and it has nothing to do with like they are never going to respond well to green climate stuff because that's just going to gut their state's economy overnight. They're never going to want to jump on board with that stuff, and all you can do is massage it slowly in just the tip, just to see how it feels until West Virginia is able or ready to move on. And endemic in the state of West Virginia is probably that they're never going to want to do that. It's West Virginia culture. They're coal miners. So in a similar vein to Newsom's California, which is a country in and of itself. I already said that, seeing how my notes reflect what's just going on in my head. And Newsom is neither concerned with the macro problems that plague the state, in large part caused by the ideological supermajority in Sacramento, nor the different regions of California, which have their own micro problems unique to themselves, which California, their sweeping legislations continue to damage these rural areas of California because they don't have anything in common with the legislation being pushed through. So again, if this is Gavin Newsom trying to run the state of California unilaterally as a country, when a state like West Virginia would just be a county in California, and Joe Manchin is literally the dude that's out there trying to bat back the storm with a fucking newspaper. That's what's going on with this. Like, there is nothing wrong with what Joe Manchin is doing to protect West Virginia's interests when you have other people like Gavin Newsom that would just come in, run roughshod over him in his Maserati and say, we're going to do things the California way in West Virginia. This is why having different voices is not only important within your party, because there's no such thing as a magic bullet that doesn't have a correlating problem to every solution. That's fucking reductive, that you think that you can just pass legislation and solve everything without making other problems that are going to come up down the line that, again, you're going to have to solve through legislation. That's fucking stupid. And that's essentially what's going on. They're trying to push through this climate change agenda in particular, and Joe Manchin is going to come up later on, but they're going to push through this climate change spending bill and not think it's going to have some type of butterfly effect into the economy and the inflation. I don't understand it, and why you're trying to paint someone like Joe Manchin, and I don't know that too much about Joe Manchin as an individual, but why you're trying to paint him as a bad guy when he's actually representing his state's interests, I don't understand. He's not on their team anymore. Even though he has the D next to him, he ain't on their team, and they're going to burn him at all costs. So this is a AP article, the next one that's going to come up hopefully, and in this one, it says all about Manchin West, what Biden wanted, the U.S. senator did not. So it's saying it launched editor of Associated Press. It launched as the new president's ambitious plan for rebuilding America. 2.3 trillion domestic infrastructure investment coupled with 1.8 trillion plan to bolster U.S. families with support for healthcare, childcare, college costs, unseen in generations. This is how this opens up. So it's literally like, let's solve the problem of the problems that we have in the U.S., including the economy and inflation, by just throwing more money. Put out the fires with a fucking fire hose full of fucking money at this point. Totaling more than $4 trillion when President Biden unveiled the Americans Jobs and American Rescue Plan in the spring. What the administration called the Build Back Better agenda was instantly compared to those of his Democratic predecessors, Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal and Lyndon B. Johnson's Great Society. Both these guys are fucking socialist shitbags. And I would tell you some of the quotes that we have, like Roosevelt was getting chummy with Roosevelt's administration were getting chummy with Mussolini's fascist party in Italy prior to World War II. And we could talk all day about Lyndon B. Johnson and what he thought of the Negroes going into the Civil Rights Act of 1964, but we don't need to, right? And how they were just closet communists, pretending to be socialists, pretending to be Democrats. Not a very good argument for anybody that actually has some functional understanding of U.S. history. And it was almost instantly shunned by Joe Manchin. No shit, because it's going to hurt his fucking state. This week, more than 15 months of breathtaking political pivots, Manchin has reduced Biden's big agenda for sweeping investment to just two: reducing the cost of prescription drugs and shoring up the subsidies some families receive to buy health insurance. Yeah, because it's like these two things would actually affect his home state of West Virginia. The centerpiece of Biden's climate change agenda was a $150 billion clean energy plan that would have awarded power providers the use that use clean sources and penalize those that don't. Yeah, because we have energy problems in the U.S. We are no longer energy independent. We've been destroying our ability to build we've been destroying our old energy that's fossil fuel based in trying to push towards clean energy that just doesn't exist. It doesn't work yet. And we're subsidizing it, and it's just still not working out. So we're just going to spend $150 billion and expect it's going to get us home. Yesterday, we talked about how Texas Texas itself threw $66 billion at their wind program, and their wind program's just not helping. And that's why Texas power grid's all fucked up right now. So, again, you're going to penalize those that they are going to use the good energy, that are going to use the reliable energy sources, and you're going to subsidize those that are going to try and embezzle your $150 billion to a source that is unreliable. That doesn't make any fucking sense, and it's just going to increase inflation. But that too is now scrapped. Manchin, among the most powerful coal state senators, prefers a fuel neutral approach that doesn't hurt his home state industry. Yes, and on top of that, being fuel neutral for the time being would be the intelligent way to go, because it would allow you the balance to use that more reliable, quote unquote, dirtier fossil fuel as you build up the infrastructure for your new, quote unquote, and I'm doing the air quotes again, quote unquote, clean green stuff that doesn't actually work right now. That would probably be the pragmatic, the smart way to go. And of course, we have this ideological wing of the Democrat Party that doesn't want to think that way. And again, just to be clear, I don't fucking like the Republicans bullet or tampon and a bullet when it comes to them, because they're all fucking incompetent, impotent hacks at this point. So to continue, to be sure, the bipartisan infrastructure bill Manchin signed on with Biden and the others made substantial investments in roads, bridges, broadband, all where Congress typically can find some agreement. And we talked about yesterday how in China, their population is starting to pull back on some of their mortgage payments for infrastructure that doesn't fucking exist yet. So this is the grift, and we're the Biden administration is trying to push through the spending plan without stuff actually existing yet. And you think that how you think that's going to help inflation, I don't know. How you think that's going to actually do anything more except expand the grift state, the austerity measures that are going forth to have your economy heavily built on just spending and not actually innovation and building new things that are from a private industry standpoint. I don't fucking know. So kudos to Joe Manchin for being that guy fighting for the rest of the country, even though he's only fighting for West Virginia. So, what is important to the Democrats right now? Well, you see, with this USA Today bill, and I should point out, I actually wrote it down in my notes. Literally, I said USA Today, the largest paper in circulation in the country. It's like saying the largest landfill fire. That's what I actually wrote down. So we're going to use a lot of USA Today stories and just realize that they're fucking bad. They're really ideologically bent. So this is what is so my notes again. This is what's important right now in politics, not the record 9.1% inflation. But there are major questions about whether the bill can even get passed. Oh, so going on to what's in the article, it says there are major questions about whether either the bill can get past a 50-50 Senate, because Manchin's going to be involved with that, and reach President Biden's death. So what the Democrats are doing right now is they're virtue signaling prior to the midterms and passing this in the House, knowing that it probably won't pass the Senate. And this is what's important, not the 9.1% inflation that's probably massaged down from over 10. No. We need to pass this abortion rights stuff that's right now in the country, because the abortion rights stuff is more important than the economy, right? And we'll get into some of the women's stuff here in a second, but this article says what's in the bills: Women's Health Protection Act, and I haven't read either of these yet. So I would have to actually sit down and see how bad that they are. But I imagine that they are pretty bad. But anyway, it says the Women's Health Protection Act of 2022 would enshrine Roe versus Wade into federal law. The Ensuring Access to Abortion Act would protect a woman's right to travel for illegal abortions. So the first one, the Women's Health Protection Act of 2022, enshrining Roe versus Wade into federal law, that's already going to be constitutionally difficult to stand up to scrutiny because of the 10th Amendment. Passing this federal law may infringe on state rights. It actually depends on how it's written again, and I highly doubt they're going to write it in such a way that respects the 10th Amendment. They're just going to codify it, or they're going to overreach it if they did try and pass it. So I would have to read that. And the other thing, the federal abortion, or the other thing of protecting women's rights to travel for abortion, there's probably already no need to pass that. There's a very narrow possibility that a red state could try and weaponize a woman's ability to travel in between states, and that would actually be more in line with conspiracy across state lines. And again, that becomes another states' rights issue, because a state does have the right to say, protect itself from people being able to conspire from an activity that is illegal outside of their state, or illegal inside their state to go to another state. It wouldn't actually be the transportation that would be illegal. It would be the discussing of committing a crime within the state that would be illegal. And again, that would still be a little bit dicey after the fact, even if that could stand up to scrutiny. So passing the law is again just virtue signaling for your base. Let's see. Continuing on, it says how they voted. The bills passed the Democratic-led House as expected. The Women's Health Protection Act went to 219 to 210, almost entirely along party lines, with every Democrat but one in favor and every Republican opposed. The Ensuring Access to Abortion Act passed 223 to 205, with every Democrat voting for it, every Republican but a handful opposing it. And I could do the math, but I don't. I think that would be like 6 or 5 Republicans jumping ship. So let's see. Moving on. Why did they hold? And again, I don't have a problem with Republicans jumping ship on the broader subject. I would have a problem with stupid people voting for stuff that they didn't read or don't understand, because that's your job as a politician. So, and I have no opinion on that, because I haven't read the bills, and I may not do so. Depends on how motivated I get. Why did they hold these votes? Even though the bills may be doomed to fail in the Senate, they provide Democrats the opportunity to get Republicans on record before the midterms, citing polls showing most Americans supporting access to abortion. The Democrats have said that Roe decision could help them hold on to the majority in the fall, though some analysts say the economy is more likely to be the top issue among voters. So at least this point, with to a certain extent, USA Today is not being the fucking pieces of shit they normally are. So it says last Friday, the president issued an order to protect access to emergency contraception and other health services. and then I left this in on purpose because it was like a link where it says more U.S. governments tell hospitals they must provide abortions in cases of emergency regardless of state law. That's an issue, because the executive orders are very limited when it comes to states, and not only are they very limited when they come to states, what the Biden administration is actually trying to give doctors cover for is to extend the definition of what emergency would be to provide abortions under the cover of law, and that's a activism, an executive order. It's no bueno. I'll talk about that here in a second. To continue, it says on Monday he ordered the hospital in every state to require doctors to perform abortions in emergency situations that would save pregnant women's lives. Under the law, no matter where you live, women have the right to emergency care, including the abortion care. Health and Human Services Secretary Javier Becerra said in a statement. So, good old Javier, the former Attorney General of California, the boss of Rachel Levine, him running his suck pull over something that he was the master of fucking being a shitbag when he was the Attorney General of California. So the fact that he doesn't understand the law, doing a job that he is not qualified for as the head of Health and Human Services, wouldn't surprise me in the least. Biden's orders came as the White House faced criticism, including from within the president's party, for not responding more robustly to the Supreme Court decision overturning Roe versus Wade. That's a statement of subjectivity. I'm wondering who and how much criticism he faced, because it's not from the right, and the country's pretty heavily divided 50-50, including within the president's party. Again, we have the two wings of the president party, the one Joe Manchin who won't fucking vote for these abortion bills, and the other side that supports fucking pedophilia. So again, where are your sources saying what criticism? Because it's doing is trying to emotionally manipulate someone who's reading this article into believing that there's a larger problem than there really is. So to continue on, this is me now because I think I wrote this down. Emergency abortions are usually legally not defined as abortions, nor medically defined that way. This is why it should be a states' right issue to define these things. And we're going to talk about that 10-year-old girl here in a second when it comes to the law of states. So again, if it's an emergency, it's usually not defined medically as an abortion, and even if it is, that quote unquote emergency has to be specifically spelled out by the law, or at least from the standpoint of medicine or the hospital. Otherwise, you just get doctors that are like, oh, well, you don't want to have this kid. Well, I guess it's an emergency. It's going to affect your lifestyle. So the Biden administration is attempting to make every doctor's own definition of law, own definition of emergency law of the land, just like birthing person is the new definition to erase what woman is. This is me more talking from my notes. What this article does is muddy the water to the point that a normie wouldn't know the reality of what's going on. What is an executive order and what it can and cannot do? Because again, you're getting into some really dicey positions where the president does not have the ability to unilaterally put his foot down and pass law that's what the legislature is for. The executive branch is the enforcement branch. So on state land, the ability for that executive order to mean anything is rather limited. So what the normie consensus on abortion actually is, and this is, I don't have anything to pull it up right now, but most of the consensus is on the polling is yes, the normie may want or may support some form of abortion, but the more they are given information on the more extreme levels of what that would fall into the category of, from a legal standpoint, they tend to want a more moderate to limited form of abortion than post birth abortions like they're doing in California. And I put in my notes that the normie tends to support some form of moderate legislation for their own state, and not some like sweeping generalized doctor gets to decide what an emergency is at the drop of a hat in an emergency room, which is not what is actually being pushed by the left. And again, the normie doesn't understand that what the Rachel Levine, Sam Brinkston form of the Democrat Party's idea of abortion, where women are just birthing people, uh, that form of abortion is not in line with what the normie would support, and that's what the USA Today article is omitting when they're talking about this thing, because most normal people would not view certain things as abortion once they're given that, and the congressional hearings that were going on this week providing some of the more activists that were brought in where they couldn't even take a moral stance against infanticide. It just go to show that. So moving on, like I said, we're going to talk a little bit more about that 10-year-old girl, because there's a USA Today article that's bullshit, and more interesting, a little bit more about what's interesting by what's omitted. If you had to blow my nose. So let's see. So this article by USA Today is Indiana doctor Kaylin Bernard, the abortion activist, and I'm going to use do the air quotes again. Doctor who shared 10-year-old abortion story did not violate HIPAA, officials say. So the funny thing is, and again to point out that USA Today is just smoking hot garbage. The University of Indiana University health physician Kaylin Bernard, who performed an abortion on a 10-year-old child who was raped, did not violate privacy laws when she shared the anecdote with news outlets, university officials said Friday. So the University of Indiana said, we hired this activist, she did something, and then we found that she didn't do nothing wrong. That's we investigated herself, and we don't see a problem. What Indiana University Health says, IU Health conducted an investigation with full cooperation of Dr. Bernard and other IU Health team members. IU Health's investigation found Dr. Bernard in compliance with privacy laws, officials said in an email. They also said that the university routinely initiate reviews on privacy and compliance, meaning that they didn't specifically pull this one to look at. It just so happened that this was the one that they looked at, and they investigated themselves and found nothing wrong, which doesn't fucking surprise me. So what does HIPAA say? Well, HIPAA is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, passed in 1996, which aims to protect the privacy of patient information. And I've had some run-ins with HIPAA from my professional life. And I could tell you that, like, there's a little bit of bullshit in this article. It says experts in HIPAA compliance say the law exists to prevent the release of identifiable information. Bernard provided the Indy Star only with the age of the girl and the state of her residence. This is bullshit. Like I said, from my personal experience, because when I was trying to talk to nurses and doctors about the statuses of patients, um, as an MP in the army, like, they wouldn't even give me general patient status. That's how fucking tight butthole they can be about this stuff. So when you're talking about a 10-year-old rape victim in Ohio versus in Indiana, I'm pretty sure that narrows the field to an identifiable person of one, right, in the entire country. So although the law enumerates different potential identifiers that must be removed, such as name, date of birth, address, there's also a final catch-all category that includes any unique identifier, he added. This category requires providers to ensure that the information cannot be reasonably linked back to the patient. Again, a 10-year-old rape victim in Indiana that traveled from Ohio. Yeah, you burned her fucking HIPAA. But that's allegedly, from my opinion. So the records obtained by the Indy Star through a public records request show that Bernard reported the abortion before the state's reporting deadline, and that she disclosed the child suffered abuse. Again, this is likely bullshit, because before the state's reporting deadline, like they said, which is, you wouldn't need to say if it wasn't put in there, because it barely it barely didn't, or it you wouldn't need to put in there that that she got it in before the deadline, unless it almost didn't get in before the deadline. Because, and I went and looked this up a little bit more. According to USA Today, the abortion, which was done on the 30th of June, and the paperwork was submitted on the 2nd. And I went and looked for the law, and I couldn't find the law of Indiana, but I did find um this from 2017 that is specifically talking about let me pull this over because it went to the wrong screen. So in this case, it's talking about a change to a 2017 change to the Indiana law that requires someone as a member of staff of a medical or public or private institution, school facility, blah 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 blah. It says legally you have to do it immediately, and it even talks about let's see. The Supreme Court of Indiana ruled that a principal did not report the rape immediately because his 4-hour delay included doing intermediary tasks such as interrogating the alleged rapist or ordering a search of the student's lot. So again, they ruled that he did not report the rape immediately. So immediately is 4-hour delay in this case. The Supreme Court rejected the principal's defense that reporting statutes permit a citizen to delay reporting in order to assess and reflect. So again, if unless there's somebody else that's telling me something else, she has to immediately report this to law enforcement. And this also points out that she has to do two things. She herself has to report it individually, and then also tell her staff or her higher ups that she reported it, because the old law used to allow you to just report it to your supervisors, and then it became an issue of your supervisors. So you could say, well, I reported it to my supervisors. I've washed my hands of the situation, and the new law in Indiana is like, no, you must individually report this. So I'm just curious if I'm understanding this correctly, how this 3-day window ends up not violating Indiana law that says you will immediately report this when she submitted her paperwork before the deadline. And in this garbage USA Today article, it doesn't actually say what the deadline is for reporting. It just says that she got it in before the deadline. That's why I went and looked it up, and I was calling bullshit on it. But again, to point all this out, this isn't about the girl. It's about what team you're on. And as long as you get the one over on the team that you're playing against, i.e. the conservatives versus the Marxists, that's all it's about. She didn't do nothing wrong, our side's right, versus, well, she did something wrong, that means our side's right. And at the end of the day, this 10-year-old girl doesn't fucking matter. So that's what we get to worry about on a larger cultural macro issue. So to move on to the culture that we have, the culture that we deserve, this article from Yahoo, where you have exclusive Fulton County DA sends target letters to Trump allies in Georgia investigation. And in this case, you have in the largest sign that she is moving rapidly in her investigation into Donald Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election. Fulton County, Georgia District Attorney Fani Willis has sent so-called target letters to prominent Georgia Republicans, informing them they could be indicted for their role in a scheme to appoint alternative electors pledged to the former president despite Joe Biden's victory in the state, according to legal sources familiar with the matter. Do it. Don't be a pussy. Take the gloves off. Fucking indict these motherfuckers. Then we can stop playing games and start, actually going after people without regard to the political optics about it. Don't be a pussy. Do it. Do it. So who is Fani Williams? Well, she's a carpetbagger. Again, Wikipedia's trash, but I'm lazy. So she was born in Los Angeles, California. She attended Howard University, which is in Washington, D.C., and then she went to law school in Emory, which is in Atlanta, Georgia. And according to this, she spent 16 years as a prosecutor in Fulton County, that's Atlanta, district attorney's office, and her most it doesn't fucking matter. In 2018, she went into private practice. That year, she ran for the seat on Fulton County Superior Court and lost. In 2020, Willis was elected district attorney of Fulton County, defeating Paul Howard, a 6-term incumbent and her former boss. I think that she may have a little bit of a conflict of interest, because if those elections in Fulton County are not strictly above board, if there isn't or is election fortification going on in Fulton County, the same person that lost their Superior Court seat and then became the district attorney in Fulton County maybe have something to potentially hide by going after people because they're investigating election improprieties in Fulton County. I don't know. That's just me. And this is someone, again, who may or may not understand the culture of Atlanta after not having been born there and having to carpetbagger herself in after getting her BA in out of state and potentially growing. It doesn't even say where she grew up, so I'm just guessing that she may not be from Atlanta, but she's able to represent the interests of Atlanta because how would she know what that fucking culture is at this point? So GOP, when I talk about here, GOP State Senator Burt Jones, it says after this story was published, Burt Jones filed a motion in Fulton County Superior Court to disqualify Willis and her chief prosecutor on the Trump probe, Nathan Ward, for the conflicts of interest due to their financial support for Bailey Jones's opponent. This is a blatant effort to sway the outcome of the election in Bailey's favor. The motion reads, therefore, District Attorney Fani Willis should be disqualified. Yeah, that's just the only reason why she has conflicts of interest going on. At the end of the article, all tuckered away from prying eyes, because most people don't actually read the whole thing. They had this little blurb that I found a little interesting, tucked all the way down after just mountains of all this bullshit. As I got to just keep scrolling all the way down bottom, it says this article actually points out it is also not clear how the target letters to Jones and Schaefer fit into Willis's overall strategy into the investigation. Because nothing that was done may be illegal, and exploring alternative actions may not be a crime unless it's defined as such. That's me saying that, like, yeah, even the person that wrote this article is like, I don't know what she's doing by sending these targeting letters out. It doesn't make a lot of sense, because you actually have to be able to show what sending out these targeted letters mean. You're essentially how you think that they broke the law. She's not showing how anybody broke the law. She just didn't like how it was handled, and it's almost like she's weaponizing her office. But that's my personal opinion again, because like I said, unless it's enumerated by law, it's defined by law to say that you can't create alternative electors because in case X, Y, and Z reason. In this case, it was there wouldn't be enough time to have an alternate set of electors created if there was found to be election fraud before the fact. And then that's why they did it before they had found the election fraud, just in case they did find the election fraud. That's the story. That's what they're sticking to. And again, unless it's defined by law that being illegal, then they didn't conspire, nor did they commit a crime, just by trying to exercise what would be their legal options. So yeah, like I said, the big thing out of that is go ahead and do it, because once you start having Democrat operatives, progressive operatives start to not just investigate but arrest members of the Republican Party, that's going to give the ability for Republican district attorneys and state attorney generals to start doing the same thing, and then we're in full-blown lawfare when it comes to the civil war that's going on in the country. All right, moving on to menstrual changes after COVID vaccine may be far more common than previously known. No, it was been previously known, but you're just coming around to it. NBC News, you fake fucking news. So this is by a Sarah Sloat, and we'll talk about her here in a second as I scratch my knee. So let's see. In this one, I have it's written as an analysis published Friday in the Journal of Science Advances found that 42% of people with regular menstrual cycles said that they bled more heavily than usual for vaccination. Did you catch that? Did you catch that? People, huh? Because men tend to menstruate quite often. The survey included over 39,000 people 18 to 80 years old who were fully vaccinated and had not contracted COVID. Again, was this 39,000 people? Was it men and women, or was it particularly just women, of which the women had a 42%? I don't know, because it's not really said in the article about how this study was put together, right? It gets ignored because of the structure. Oh, so there's an actual quote in here from some person by the name of Lee, some assistant professor at Tulane University, just to give you an idea of the ideological bent of what's going on. It gets ignored, i.e., menstruation, because of the structure of science. There are very few senior people in science and medicine who are not white men. it's just not something they are thinking about as part of their living. Fuck you. Fuck you. Because right now, I can identify as a woman. The person that you're literally talking to, don't mind the voice. I identify as a woman right now. I identify as a woman. So all you need to do is have those quote unquote white men that are in charge of science and medicine that don't care about your menstruation. All they have to do, like good old Rachel Levine here, Rachel Levine, all you have to do is have them identify as black, as black, as black women, and then the people that are in charge of science are just black women. Fuck you, because science gives a fuck about your fucking about this shit, right? The actual study that's supposed to be talked about, where the vaccine is affecting 42% of men or women. Because again, imagine that if we actually could understand what she's talking about, where if 42% of women had the vaccine affect their regular menstrual cycles, or 42% of people. So if this was all people in the study, that means literally almost all the women in the study had a problem with their menstrual cycles. If it was an even distribution of males and females, if it was 42% of the entire study, that means 42% of potential females had a problem, or excuse me, 42% of the entire study, which means roughly, what would it be in this case? 84% of the women in the study had a problem with their menstrual cycle, versus 42% of women, which would be half of the women in the study. 84% of the women, or 42% of the women, based off if we're playing fuck games with fucking qualifiers. Um so and as I literally wrote down in my notes, get the fuck out of here. When you can't even define what a woman, what a woman is, or are, what do you know of these white men aren't just identifying as such? As I just said, they could be black women, as I just said, or non-binary animal role-playing enthusiasts like fucking Sam Brinton. Who the fuck knows? I bet if you're a female, you would like to know how much the vaccine is going to affect you or your other loved ones that that take it, versus someone playing fuck games with your health in a fucking NBC article. So where the fuck was the science and the science reporter 2 years ago about this? Because people were actually talking about this multiple years ago. They were talking about, not just we don't have the data on the long-term effects of the vaccine 2 years ago. The other thing that they were discussing, once the data started coming out about basically like the largest fucking experimental human experiment conducted in human history, like when this stuff was coming out a year two ago, it was actually like buried by news outlets like NBC. So again, for YouTube censors, I am not saying what my personal opinions on this. I am just talking about what good old Sarah Sloat is talking about within the article, right? So who is Sarah Sloat, right? Well, her, here her actual .net page is. She's a writer and an editor. You're not a fucking editor. Uh, she actually is a science consultant on the Unstoppable Wasp, a comic book. That's how much science she knows, that she's able to be a consultant on a comic book. And mind you, Marvel Comics is just this ideological garbage factory at this point, and you're going to be seeing it more and more in Phase 4 as they take current Marvel politics, Marvel comic politics, insert it into the mainstream movies and entertainment that's going on out there. So who else is Sarah Sloat? Well, or she also said that she's a fact checker, and I don't think she fact checks anything if she's going to put out an article like this. But the other thing that you could see, the type of person that she is writing this article, what type of ideological lens that she's viewing the world through. Her Twitter page, she actually has written down, it's almost as if mistaking relentless financial growth for progress was a mistake, and now we are stuck in a system designed to propagate greed at any cost and calls it liberty. So you could kind of see, yeah, she's probably on the left side of the ideological lens, probably anti-capitalist, if I'm just going to guess based off of what she pointed out. And we can go down, and I try and guess. She doesn't have really anything that's too hardcore, even though she does have that pregnant person. Instead of calling it a woman, it's a pregnant person. But she's quote unquote, and I'm doing the air quotes again, thing. So you can't entirely attribute it to her, but she does have, let me just check something. Yeah, she does have her in her bio, because you can identify as those things, right? And she does have other stuff down here. If it'll pop up, she's all stoked that trying to use the propaganda that there were women that engaged in Viking fighting back, at this point it would be like what, 1200 years ago or something like that. So she has that type of stuff in there, grasping at any straws to show that women can exist outside, their provided gender role within society. That in Western culture we don't actually have that problem, because she's able to be a reporter. Women are able to be scientists. They can be special forces in our military. I don't know what her point is, what her argument is behind that. Here it is. I'll add another fun fact from my Viking feature to this, whatever. In a story told by a cleric in 1800s who witnessed an attack, he says that alongside the Viking invaders were women who weren't fighting. They were egging the men on. So again, like, female Vikings are having a moment in 2022. However, pop culture isn't telling the whole story. The reality of Viking women is far more complex than modern video games or movies like Thor, Love and Thunder, and The Northman might suggest. So again, she has a particular ideological lens that she's trying to view the world for. It's going to bleed out into her science reporting. I don't know what it is, but it's not a very good fucking article, because I have basic questions that aren't being answered because she's letting her ideology getting in front of the fact that, like, women are women and men are men, and fuck you. So let's see. The last story. I believe this is the last story of the day. So we have a United States House Republican by the name of Victoria Spartz, who's a actual honest to God Ukrainian born naturalized citizen. She decided, and this, I went and looked up these two people, Andrew de whatever and Olivia Beavers. There didn't appear to be anything too ideological bent on this, but what you're looking at is a very odd hit piece for laundering information. So what good old Victoria Spars got in trouble for, it appears, is like I said, you're going to see a narrative of how information is laundered, and what you're supposed to believe being flipped on its head, um, from what you were originally supposed to think. So in this case, they're they have a number of anonymous sources in this article, 3 from what I counted. Um, some GOP lawmaker who serves in the House Foreign Affairs granted anonymity to speak candidly about a colleague, i.e., Representative Spartz, said her naiveness is hurting our own people. It is not helpful to what we're trying to do, and I'm sure her facts are accurate. I'm not sure if her facts are accurate. We have vetted these guys. The Republican warned that sparse comments could be hurtful about the war experts. So what she came out and did is she actually was speaking out against the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, and another Ukrainian foreign ministry. Let's see, and another Ukrainian politician, speaking about how corrupt the country is. And Spars has said that she's traveled to the country a half dozen times since the war began. And so now she's finally speaking out against the corruption that's going on within the country. They said and Ukraine doesn't particularly like that. Right now, it appears that the GOP stance, just like the Democrat stance, is pro-Ukraine, but politicians need an out, because otherwise, going in the midterm, especially if we're going to get more U.S. commitment other than just throwing billions and billions of dollars into the fucking abyss and hoping for a different outcome. So to move on, another House Republican who was granted anonymity for the same reason offered a blunt reply of "what the fuck," literally written in the article. I pulled that out just to show the state of, right here, the state of our journalism. Yes, because we no longer have the decorum. That's why I just talk the way I do. So now we have 2 anonymous sources. Can I get a third? Oh, a third House Republican granted anonymity to speak candidly about Spartz. Said she had a reputation for elbowing her way into briefings and meetings for committees she didn't belong to, like the Foreign Affairs panel, where multiple members have tried to address her comments behind closed doors. Yes. I'll see you, Representative Spartz, and I'll raise you a Democrat in Amy Klobuchar that has a reputation for sucking, or Kamala Harris, who has massive turnover within her office. Now it's turning into a fucking hit piece, other than just laundering the narrative, muddying the waters. Was I supposed to support Ukraine, or am I not supposed to support Ukraine? I don't know. Um, Lindsey Graham said, I don't share her criticisms. Let's see. I believe that Zelensky government and the Ukrainian people have risen to the moment. It is our national security interest to stand with the Ukrainian people and their elected leadership. In statements and interviews, Spartz has pushed her better oversight of has pushed for better oversight of the U.S. weaponry flowing in Ukraine, an issue that has attracted bipartisan security scrutiny. Yeah, no shit. Like I showed yesterday, they're just fucking SUVs being opened up with fucking like wire guided missile systems and anti tank rockets that we're supposed to be, or that we're sending into Ukraine, and we have no fucking accountability for. I'm sure that there'll never be a private passenger plane that's shot down because of any of our fucking incompetence that's going on. So as she goes after Zelensky's top aides, the first term Republican has previously generated headlines for her poor past staff retention rate. Current and former aides described to political a hostile work environment to which Spartz repeatedly berates her staff, which has nothing to do with the fact that she's literally speaking out against Zelensky and Zelensky's regime, which is in stark contrast to what most GOP and Democrats are doing. So again, we don't want lockstep within our politicians. We want a wide variety of conversations so we can hopefully get to the point that we're supposed to be at. So they're concerned that Sparks' public break from Zelensky and her corruption accusation about his closest aides could portend future cracks in U.S. support for Ukraine, especially as the midterm elections approach. It's almost like we shouldn't have been involved with the fucking first place. And since people don't necessarily know, by people, I mean Democrat and GOP handlers don't particularly know which side of the aisle or what side of the voting ballot potential voters are going to be involved with. This is them, again, shaking that spider's web, seeing how the tip feels, because they want to know how big or not too big to make an issue and what side to be on the closer we get to the midterms. In this case, the allegations against Ukraine and their corruptions have plagued them for years now, going back to the Obama administration. And this is why the NATO and EU have yet to have them enter, is because they have one of the most corrupt countries in the world, just more corrupt even though than Russia. So now that Victoria Spartz, and I actually have her pulled up so we could see a little bit more about her and what her politics are, where she stands on the ideological spectrum. It says that she immigrated to the U.S. in 2000 after meeting her husband on a train. She became a U.S. citizen in 2006. I really like the point on here where Spartz was a founding member of the Hamilton, Indiana Tea Party. Yes, so she's probably a libertarian. I like this. I like this a lot. So the two things that you're going after is she's not towing the right ideological lines for a war that the U.S. should have very little involvement with, and that she may be kind of a difficult person to work for as a representative, regardless of what her stances are and how effective she is at representing her constituents. That is your fucking argument. So anyway, to finish, the idea that you have at least, and this is going on in both political parties, is not limited to the Democrats in this case. The Republicans are having their own internal civil war going on between neocons, which are essentially just fucking like forever war liberals, going up against your populists, which are slightly more, how shall we say, libertarian, even though I wouldn't entirely extend that definition to them. And then on the other side, you have maybe more sane, moderate Democrats going up against like the progressives that are pushing women as birthing people in their party. And you're wondering why we have the divide that's going on, and who are pushing people, especially writing articles in the direction of believing that like the larger zeitgeist of people, the larger voting population block, the normie, wants these things that are going on. And again, I don't know. So anyway, I forget what I was going to label this podcast. Uh, you know, That would be what I would put in here, but I'm about done speaking for the day. We're at a minute 9, and maybe I'll do something tomorrow. Maybe